Good evening, everyone. Let's begin today's articles. The first one is about demographic mission and which part of the syllabus is this linked to. GS1, Indian society. In that, you have demographics. First, let's look at the context. What is the context of this news item? Recently, on August 15th, 2025, the government announced that they will come up with a so-called demographic mission, especially in the context of migration from Bangladesh. So the objective of this demographic mission is to ensure that people from Bangladesh do not change the demography of the northeastern states. Okay. However, the present article is not about that news, but rather the actual problem of our demography. What is the actual problem? Yes, even let's make this interactive because we have had this issue of demography quite a few times. What is the biggest problem when you look at our population? Let's say if demography is the study of our population, what is the biggest problem statement that we are supposed to solve? See, there are two ways to look at it. The first problem is the older version or the old kind of thinking about this problem is population control. But what is the actual problem? We can't control the population that is already existing. What about them? What kind of life should we give to those who are already here? It is about ensuring that the demography is getting a quality life. Okay. So, the problem statement should be redefined. What do I mean by this? Till now, we are talking about our population as if it's a burden. The very attitude of the government towards our population is that we have to reduce them or control them. Yes, that is necessary, but history has time and again shown that a state-led or a government intervention on this front has never really worked. Whether it is China, Korea, any country where this activity has been promoted by the government or the state, it didn't really kick off, or it didn't produce the intended results. Why? For example, if you see the case of China, which went with a one-child policy, what happened as a result? Today, they are in a phase where their population cannot be replaced. The older people are not being replaced by the younger folks because the institution of marriage has fundamentally changed. And family system has taken a hit. This led to a rise of single parent families or situation where there are no, how do I put it, like there are no children in the family itself. Similar sociological phenomenon described by the sociological term called DINK, D-I-N-K, double income no kid. Okay, so yeah, double income, no kid, such kind of phenomenon are happening on one side. And the present reality, when you look at the demographics as a complete system, is the fact that the so-called intervention by the state is not working, and the only kind of intervention by the state that will actually work is by treating demographics as human resources, as human capital, rather than thinking of them as a liability. Okay, this fundamental shift in our ideology towards demographics should happen. Okay, let's say it happened. At least on the face of it, we are having discussions on demographic dividend. What is the meaning of the word demographic dividend? Okay. Yeah. So, like we were talking till now, we saw population as a liability, and we need to shift that perception towards demographics from a liability as an asset, and only then we can reap the so-called demographic dividend. Okay, what should we do to make this whole philosophy of treating human beings as assets to a nation? What are the set of measures that we should be taking to see this wishful thinking of treating population as a liability into a asset? That is the subject matter of this present discussion. Okay. However, this article is linked to two other articles. One is this: in Morocco, Madagascar, there are some protests happening. And there is another article on how the public services recruitment should be revamped. These three have some common link. Okay? What is that common link? Trusting the governments to do their job. I'll get back to that. So, here we have seen how the present scope of demographics needs to be altered, and then there are specific parameters in the demographics that are studied. Demographics heavily relies on fertility, mortality, and migration. These people, these social scientists, are primarily focused on these three parameters only: how many people are born, how many people are dying, and how many people are moving between one place to another. These things are fine, but they do not capture the exact realities of these moving population or the present living conditions of the entire population. Okay, you are capturing this data, but how will it exactly tell you the kind of quality that these migrants are having? You don't have exact numbers. Apart from a rough ballpark figures that so many people are moving from north to south. This is not exactly going to help us in policy making. Okay? So that is the existing problem. The agenda of a demography mission should not necessarily be limited to reading the future of demography, but in recognition of emerging population features. What do I mean by this? Just like in Bihar's SIR, where the entire exercise was premised on one assumption: people don't move out of their residence, which is a fundamentally flawed assumption. The reality is People always move out of their houses in search of either education, employment, simply put, better quality of life. But what is this better quality of life? What metric should we capture? Is it about education? Is it about money? Is it about health? These are the areas where policymakers should have a debate and come to a consensus. This is the actual metric to decide demographic mission. A fundamental transition in the way we look at our demography, followed by a series of measures that enhance the quality of life of these living people and move beyond the trioca or the three metrics that usual demographers focus on. And sometimes to measure the quality of life, per capita income is taken as a proxy. Just because you are having a per capita income doesn't necessarily translate into good quality. Why? Because per capita income, we discussed the other day, 50% of GDP is there with very few people. How many members? 350, yeah. Hardly 315 people have 50% of India's GDP. Remove them from the list. Tell me what is the per capita income of this country now. That is a real metric. But per capita income calculation is also not a problem. We have to see the actual real problem is we not having capabilities to produce good quality jobs. When I say we, it includes both the government as well as the people. So we require a coordinated effort both from the people as well as the governments to improve our capabilities. That is when we can think of jobs. Wealth generation is a long process. It will not happen overnight. And we have to strategize and work for it consistently over a long period of time. Across history, if you see what generated wealth, the fundamentals are always the same. If you can't add value, why will anyone pay us? What will we bring to the table? Ultimately, at the end of the day, that is what matters in an economy. What value are you generating? And the tools required to generate that value are nothing but the skills. So the demographic mission is not only going to see this transition, it should actually institutionalize a mechanism to ensure that skills are imparted to people. And this is not given in the news article, but this is my own opinion. What is the biggest skill that India should have going forward in the age of AI? What kind of skill? Yes? Digital literacy. Yes? Anybody else? Cognitive skills. What do you mean by cognitive skills? Ability to think. You're close. The biggest skill that India can have is having the skill of learning itself. In a future where every technology is going to change every 6 months, what gives us an edge? Scientific temper and the methodology to learn. I am advocating the same pattern even for UPSC aspirants as well. The biggest skill that you will have going forward to clear this exam is having the skill of learning and unlearn what doesn't work. And this requires an unflinching commitment for scientific temper. Look at the data. What is working, what is not working. And what should we do to learn those skills? The same thinking should be incorporated to the masses as well, at different levels. It's not like every technology is going to change every 6 months. It will be very difficult and cost ineffective also for businesses to keep on changing new technology. So at one point when a sweet spot in our technological growth occurs, at that point we have to capitalize. We will again have a short window, and that window should be capitalized and wealth should be generated by our nation, not just in one sector but in every sector. And that is our best bet for wealth generation. It need not be the same path like China. Every country in this world is now having a shortage of skilled workers. Especially in the age of AI, you might be wondering, we don't need workers and everyone will be replaced. No, that's still a far-fetched dream. There are two arguments for skilling human beings. One argument says that it is futile because in the age of AI, every mental activity is taken up by AI, and every physical activity will be taken by the robots trained by AI. That is a defeatist thinking. When Swiggy and Zomato came for our convenience, a lot of people thought that this is a fad and it will go away. Now in today's world, this e-commerce etc. became such a big trend. It became a habit for a lot of people. Technology creates dependence. AI will create dependence for people also. And when such a dependence is created, pitching AI as a solution for the dangers of AI is never going to work. You will still need human beings. So, in a world that is predominantly driven by these AI driven skills, let's take a step back and still focus on what will not change. The fact that technology has invariably made human beings lazy, that is not going to change. If I have to phrase it in a much flowery and poetic way, I'll tell you the same thing. Technology has enhanced the quality of life of people. It's just another way of saying that it made us lazy. And as long as people are lazy, you will still find avenues to make money. To figure that out, we need a vigilant population and a vigilant state, and digital literacy coupled with focusing on bridging the existing public service delivery gaps. We can use technology to bridge that gap. For example, in healthcare, we were talking about how a lot of districts do not have access to basic infra. And some of the preventable diseases can be administered using AI. Bridging the gap between existing existing problems can be done through AI. Anyway, skills is the central point of focus in the article. Okay, what else is discussed here? Okay, they were talking about the issue of migration. What is the assertion here? See, despite the constitutional guarantee of a free mobility of individuals, migrant identity is often threatened on various grounds. Before you look at the article, can you tell me what are the threats that a migrant faces? Go through your syllabus itself to generate points. Let's say a person from Bihar is settling down in Mumbai. What is the first problem? First is their identity itself. Sons of the soil theory comes into the picture, a cultural clash. So, on paper, we say that migration is allowed, etc. But in reality, the problems of regionalism, communalism, language, what is happening in Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, like same thing. Language becomes a flashpoint. Culture becomes a flashpoint. Then followed by many other basic necessities like roti, kapda, makan, like your food, shelter, and clothing, basic education for your kids, access to healthcare, access to any democratic institutions of the state subject. For example, you have a land problem in your home state. You are away. You can't deal it from here. You have to go there. So there are many such problems, and author says that this is not a stated identity but a constructed one. What do you mean by this? The identity of migrant in India is existing on paper only, but in reality, they don't get any public services. How do you fix that? This should also be the subject matter of our so-called demographic mission. Next, another complexity is the home and host attribute, which needs to have an equal stake. See, just like a citizen of Telangana, let's say there is a migrant from North India. That migrant and the citizen of this state of Telangana ideally should have an equal say. And if they have an equal say, there will be a burden on the exchequer of the state. How should that economic cost be borne? Unless and until we have a economic beneficiary identified, that should be tagged to the budgets of the respective states. We don't have that kind of a public administrative infrastructure. We do have a basic Aadhaar, but that is not linked and it is not interoperable between the states. There is no coordination between the respective states' financial departments. Let's say if there is a migrant from Bihar and he wants to get his or her kid educated in Hyderabad, ideally the budget should come from Bihar. But is that happening? So these are the kind of issues where when we speak about the quality of life, fix these issues first. And that's the central point of this article. Recognition of changing demographics is perhaps necessary in all possible planning, policy making, evaluation and monitoring. Per capita hangover continues to prevail, which ignores the composition of the population and denominator. That is the whole point. Okay. Now, I've explained this in a very superficial level. I'm not going into depth, but if I have to tell you the implications of what can happen if the state does not do its duty, we will go to the next set of articles. Morocco, Madagascar. See, we are talking about international relations events and comparison of those events to India. In the last few months, I was talking about how this whole debt that has put a lot of countries in the global economy on a back foot. Look at the series of events that happened afterwards. Japan's prime minister resigned. In Indonesia, the population set fire on public buildings. Our neighbors, Bangladesh, saw sort of a military coup. Not just military, like civil war, you can say. Myanmar is anyway under stress because the army took over. Sri Lanka has witnessed something similar. Nepal has seen it recently. Now we are looking at Morocco, Madagascar. Let's not talk about some states like Pakistan. So, what is the reality? Are jobs not produced? Is it because of high debt? One leads to another. When you have a high debt, you're not in a position to repay the loans, forget about investing that money into a productive job creating avenue. That is the problem number one. This brings us to the point, are the existing global models of governance and the existing so-called developmental models, are they actually working? Let's take a step back and see what can happen. Let's begin with the debt part. When you have a debt where the global debt is 300 trillion, which is much greater than the 100 trillion GDP that the world is producing. Unless and until there is one extremely rich country that can pay the debt of the entire globe, together as a system, it doesn't look very promising. Nobody can pay up the interest. You can either pass it on to the next generation, increase the taxes and risk inflation, or we don't have a solution. Is there anything that we can do? No. It is in this kind of a situation, protectionism is treated as a reason just to divert people. Now, let's come to each individual economy. When you have a debt more than what you are producing, it essentially means that you are under pressure. Add to this, when you have a country like China, which gave you that money, you owe this power huge amount of money, right? And when you don't pay them back, you are literally under their hostage. This is what China calls the checkbook diplomacy. So, an economic problem spiraled out and became an international relations problem. So, the governments in those respective countries are now forced to either offer a good job or some respite from the inflationary pressures. Across the world, and this began from US, education is promised as the antidote for poverty. You get educated and then you get a very good job. This will settle all your problems. This was the promise. But the common thread that you see here is all these protests are now led by the so-called Gen Z. That is the people who are born after 97, 98. Why? Because now they are at a place where they enter into the economy and expect a good life. The quality of life, good life, and this opens up the dimension of sociology. We started at economy and now we are at sociology, GS1. What is this good life? Here comes the concept of social mobility. What do you mean by this social mobility? Let's say your parents earned some 1 lakh per month salary and they offered you a very good life. Your parents most likely must have earned in that range only. But take a look at a lot of youngsters now. Those who are graduating out of so-called IITs and IITs and doctors or top colleges, MBAs, economics, commerce graduates, everyone. The top tier, their starting packages are also in the same way, in the same range. If they don't see an opportunity that clearly shows that I am doing better than my parents, they will feel frustrated. That is point number one. What is the implication of this frustration? We have to accept the sociological reality that the old promise of development, which stops at roti, kapda, makan or the basic necessities, that has fundamentally altered. Gen Z doesn't require roti, kapda, makan because that is already taken care by their parents' generation. And now you must be wondering or judging that how can you say you don't care about them, because the reality is you won't aspire for something that you already have. Policymakers should realize and understand, in all these countries where these kind of Gen Z protests are happening, the inability of the state to think beyond the old models of governance and get to the ground reality and understand the needs of the younger generations are failing. This is the lesson. A case to the point being every country that is carrying out these protests, whether it is Morocco or Madagascar, and in these countries you have a majority of population, more than 50% of the population above the age of 18. If such small countries are witnessing such kind of a pressure, imagine the implications for India. India being the most populous country in the world right now. I've told you, right? The number of people born in India in the last year is more than entire North America, South America, Europe, and some other nations put together. And we have to provide economic opportunities for everyone in the next 20 years. We don't have that window of opportunity to reimagine the kind of development. So it should definitely be better than what was in the parents' generation in that respective geographies. So people in the south, where the per capita income and the quality of life was relatively better, South Indian states will have a tougher time from the younger populations because they've already seen this so-called quality of life. Compare that to the population in the north. They are now seeing this economic transition where the tier 2 towns are getting richer. There are two nations, India and Bharat. India corresponds to the urban elite and the upper middle class that drove Indian economy till now. But the real strength of the centers, they propel the growth unlike these cities. So we need to reimagine our future. And it is in this context only, in the short time period where economic opportunities are not visible to the younger population, the next best alternative for that kind of population is government jobs. And the biggest problem of the government jobs is lack of trust in the recruitment systems. And I don't think I have to explain to the students of Telangana about this article. But anyway, trust. When you say it is a broken system, what do you mean by that? Trust and legitimacy are two concepts that we deal in political science and ethics. When I say trust is the invisible grease that fuels or makes the governance systems easy to flow. What do I mean by that? When the population of this country believe whatever action that the government is taking is fair, you will have compliance from them. And if it is not the case, at every single step you will have a court case. And even after the process is over, nobody thinks it is fair. If this has to be corrected, there needs to be a system that is accountable. Right? What are the series of steps that the governments must take in conducting public exams? That is the focus of this article. See here. Here you will have biometric attendance, encryption, and the use of technology to show that accountability in 2025 or 24. In the mains part, either in ethics or GS2, there was one question. Okay. So you will have a solution in this part. Okay. 3 of these articles are interlinked, and that is the reason I clubbed all of them together. the underlying thread is always the same. We need not just a business as usual approach, see and redefine the idea of development. What is the aspiration of this younger generation? Unless the governments get down to the root of the problem, they will not understand it. And to reimagine that future, talk to the younger folks, get their validation, consult them, build economic models to suit their aspirations. And if we don't do that, and if we think any social media dissent is just some noise, India will also have to face the pressure. But situations are not as bad as it is in other countries, and we have to make it better and better to stop this resentment, even if it is in small localized pockets. Okay, moving on. Great Nicobar revives the issue of nature's legal rights. In 2022, you've had a question on environmental rights. Okay. On similar lines, in GS2, you can expect a question on how a natural body can have rights. Can it be treated on the same line as a human being? Let's say there is a river, there is a mountain, or there is a protected area or a forest. Can we treat these biodiverse entities in the same way as we treat human beings? If yes, what is the implication? If no, what is the implication? That is the scope of this article. Any developmental project usually, let's say there is a mining project. Ask any aspirant, especially from before 2020 time period, if they are primarily trained in the initial days of UPSC in that time period, they will have this either or kind of a thinking. So when I ask, should we go for mining or should we protect environment? Their answer will be either one of them. You either go for development or environment. Without realizing that every mining activity is both an environmental issue as well as an economic issue. Every resource that human beings use is in fact given by nature itself. And the problem is not resource utilization. The problem is overutilization. Let me explain this a bit more. Environment is like a system. Okay? A system will recycle the resources that it has. Let's say you have a rock or a fossil fuel which is produced due to some geological activity. You take it out, that is you extract it, use it. We think it is renewable, non-renewable, but in reality it can be renewable, but it only takes some billions or millions of years, and we don't know how or when exactly it will get replenished. Because there is a concept called time lag in any system. It will take its own sweet time to get replenished, that resource. Okay, why am I talking about all of this? I'll come back. I'll explain why. So, unless you give a natural resource the time it needs to regenerate, it will essentially become non-renewable. Are you going to exist that long? No. That's why for our practical, from our point of view, from an anthropogenic point of view, anthropocentric point of view, we are calling this non-renewable. Okay? if we change that perception, let's say a petrol reserve is filing a case in Supreme Court saying that I don't want to be exhausted. I want to remain in the state that I am in so that I maintain the balance of that ecosystem. It might sound like science fiction, but what if that is the case? What will be the implication? If Mother Earth or nature is a representative in a court, do you think nature will want to fight its case? Definitely yes. Because the kind of exploitation we are doing, definitely there will be many cases filed. And if history were any proof, every such legal battle was won by the law of karma, by nature itself. Every time humans thought we are here to triumph, a natural disaster has struck and restored that balance. So, coming back from that level of understanding, should we give environment the rights that they deserve, these entities deserve? The practical significance of doing this is we will get to exploit these resources only to the extent that they do not disturb the entire system. So there is a limitation. In the absence of such rights, we are exploiting the resources only if they do not harm anyone in that system. Again, there is a anthropocentric jurisprudence. What did I say jurisprudence means? The logic of creating a law. And if you treat human beings as the center of that law, we will only see if any mining activity taken up is destroying any human being. Even that part we are doing very badly. Because let's say, for example, there is a act called the Forest Rights Act. And in 2013, there is a judgment called the Niyamgiri Hills judgment by Supreme Court, where Supreme Court clearly told people of Gram Sabha can virtually say, I don't want this project at all. They can veto and the project can stop. Therefore, in many such situations, government is, there is an allegation against the government that due process was not followed and this forest rights were not settled. This creates another set of problems. Okay? So, if you see this article, it talks about many cases like Orissa Mining Corporation or the 2013 judgment, Niyamgiri judgment. And then we have many international examples also. For example, you have the case study of Colombia, where Colombia gave this environmental rights. They started treating environmental entities as living beings and gave them rights. This will put all this natural resources on the same pedestal as human beings. Okay? So this is the takeaway from this entire article. Now, if you take a look at this question here, projects like Great Nicobar Development reveal the tension between economic expansion, ecological justice, and constitutional governance. Three different topics. GS2 and GS3 are clubbed together. In the light of this, discuss whether recognizing the rights of nature can serve as a viable framework for sustainable development. So, what is it asking? If GS2 can help the issues that are relevant in GS3. Simply put, this is the need. Can you generate an answer by hearting any information here? No, right? It requires a thought structure. I gave you a simple framework of thought here. GS2 helping GS3. It is there in the question itself. The why, this is called the telos based thinking. The purpose driven thinking will help you structure your answer. Now, if you were to write an answer for this question, how will you start? You have, let's say, 11 minutes. I'm not going to give you 11 minutes, but I just want an intro from you. What will be the introduction here? Start thinking and tell me. Projects like Great Nicobar Development Plan reveal the tension between economic expansion, ecological justice, and constitutional governance. GS2 as a solution to GS3. I gave you a clue, rights of nature. So this solution should act as a bridge. That itself will be your intro. Can you try? Rights of nature, where environmental entities are treated like living beings, tries to resolve the tension between economic exploitation and ecological vulnerability. You are using something as a bridge between two things. That is the way you should introduce an answer. So, your GS2 is linked to GS3. Yeah. It will become lengthy. If see, always introduction should be crisp and short, and the examiner should get an intent that your idea is you understood the demand of the question in the shortest possible way. Still, you spend most of your time on analysis and explaining the part, not on introducing the problem statement. The problem with that judgment is that it is stayed by Supreme Court. So again, to explain further why it is stayed, it will be a part of the body, but as a matter of principle, why do we need this? When I say telos-based thinking, if we have a constitutional framework where you give rights to environment, it will bridge the gap between the development and ecological destruction through constitutional governance. The question itself is giving the hint. So in GS2, introduce it like this. In GS4, tell why this is the solution. In GS2, state. In GS4, give a reason and then explain later. Same question can be asked in GS2, GS4, GS3, anywhere. Depending on the paper it is asked, you have to change your style of answering. Okay? Now one last article is there about quantum. See, this article is an application of quantum physics. See, the problem with present day encryption. Encryption means you see some random numbers that are generated by a system, and underneath that you will have a secured communication. Unless and until you break that layer, it will be difficult to check the communication channels. The problem with that is, even though it is very difficult, it is not uncrackable. So, why is this the case? Because even though the number seems very random, computers are something that cannot function through randomness. That randomness is programmed and it is engineered. If we do the reverse engineering, we can arrive at the mechanism of creating that, and using that random number generator only, we can crack the safe communication. So, encryption till now was based on maths. Quantum physics gave us for the first time an opportunity to take this problem of securing communication away from the zone of maths into the zone of physics. How? At subatomic level, you will see that there is a lot of randomness in how photons function. We are using the quantum physics laws and applying that here to secure that communication. And there is one more principle which you just have to recognize. You are not expected to explain this scientific phenomenon. You are not nuclear physicists, quantum physicists. So don't get into that level of depth. All you have to know is, with quantum physics, securing the communication channels without any threat of that communication channel being broken down, today it is possible, at least on paper. That is the significance of this. So the fact that older problem is based on maths and the newer problem or the newer solution is based on quantum physics. This transition you should be aware. That's all I'm expecting from you. Okay? That's it for the day. Thank you.